On a quaint farm in a picturesque valley, there lived a small spotted chick who had a tendency to wander too far from the hen house. His mother told him not to go astray, warning him about the foxes and the wolves, but he never listened. One morning he was foraging beyond the fence line when he was startled by the sound of a strange voice. "Good morning, young lad," a wolf with hypnotic blue eyes softly said. The baby bird looked up in horror to find himself surrounded by the intruder and his entire pack. A cold shiver went down his tiny little spine. "Please don't eat me. Spotted chicks are bitter and tough to chew," he pleaded, repeating something his mother told him to say in a sticky situation such as this. "Don't be silly. We have no intention of eating you. What would lead you to such a foolish notion?" "I've been told by my elders that the foxes and the wolves are our natural-born enemies," he replied. "The foxes aren't to be trusted, that much is true, but we mean you no harm. We don't trifle with small game. We leave that to the lesser hounds. We hunt larger game. You're hardly worth our time." "Really?" the young chick asked naively. "Of course, this is all a big misunderstanding. I saw you wander beyond the fence line and thought, now there's someone who's bold and doesn't live in fear. Perhaps he can make peace between us." "Me? What can I do?" "Tell the eldest rooster that I wish to speak to him. Here's a gesture of goodwill to show that we've come here in earnest." He gave a nod to one of the wolves standing toward the front of the pack, who spat live grubworms onto some dirt near the grass. The young spotted chick could not believe his eyes. Grubworms were his favorite delicacy, so he began feasting. "Tell the other chicks that we'll have grubworms here for them every morning," the alpha wolf continued. "That's very kind of you," the little chick said while taking a quick break from gorging himself. "Think nothing of it. I'll call you Spot if that suits you." "That suits me just fine. What's your name?" "Call me Master. Let's make the grubworms our little secret. Will you do that for me, Spot?" "How come?" "Your elders will get grubworms too, but all in good time. I'd simply like to talk to them first. Come back here tomorrow with your friends to tell me all about your conversation with the leader of the hen house." "Yes, Master," Spot said before returning to his grubworm feast. With that, the alpha and his pack ran off. Later that day, Spot told his mother that he'd met some wolves who turned out to be very nice. "They're nothing like the scary monsters you make them out to be in my bedtime stories, Mama. In fact, the leader of their pack says he'd like to make peace with us. He wants to speak with wisdom," her son casually told her. She found this extremely troubling and immediately went to Wisdom, the oldest and most experienced of all the roosters. Upon hearing of this strange encounter, their patriarch beckoned her son, whom she hastily brought before him. "This is a trick," Wisdom declared with authority. "My brother was eaten by a wolf. I will not be fooled by their deceit." "Are you sure it wasn't a fox? Perhaps you were mistaken." The roosters and hens all recoiled. His impertinence and disrespect sent a cackle through the coop. "How dare you!" Old Wisdom crowed, more loudly than they'd all heard in quite some time. Spot's mother quickly rushed in to escort her son away. "I'm so sorry, he's young and doesn't know any better," she said, while pushing Spot toward the door with her wing. "I'll straighten him out." After a stern talking to, she sent him to bed without any supper. Little did she know his little belly was still full of grubworms, and that her admonitions had gone in one ear and out the other. In fact, the moment his mother nestled in for the night, he snuck out to tell the other chicks about the feast that awaited anyone who joined him beyond the fence line the next morning. Some were scared or simply skeptical, but most of the brood found the allure of gorging themselves on grubworms too tempting to resist. So, they followed Spot out into the field the next day. "Good morning, little ones," their new master warmly greeted them. "Thank you all for coming." With a nod, his pack gave up their grubworms, and the chicks began greedily gobbling them up with delight. "How did your leader respond to my proposal?" "He said that a wolf ate his brother," Spot replied, "and when I asked him if he was certain that it wasn't a fox, he crowed in anger. I've never seen him so mad." This sort of outburst is expected from someone small-minded and prejudiced against our kind. "I'm certain you're right. It was a fox and not a wolf who ate the poor fool's brother. You've shown great bravery for such a young chick. In fact, you've all shown great faith in coming here. Your generation will go down in history as having truly made a difference." "I don't think he'll agree to meet with you," Spot followed, chirping with his mouth full as he chewed. "Then you should not listen to someone so close-minded. I suggest that you all chirp in unison whenever he says something hateful and keep doing so as loudly as possible to drown out his bigoted drivel. He'll come around eventually and agree to meet with me. That night, Wisdom tossed and turned until he finally resolved that their offspring simply needed to be better educated. So the next day he called an emergency meeting to address the wolf crisis. All the roosters, hens and chicks gathered in the coop, then Wisdom solemnly addressed the brood. A few days ago, one of our chicks said that the wolves wish to make peace. This will never happen. He crowed loudly while directing his glare towards Spot, who was nestled in the front row next to his mother. Some of Spot's friends began to chirp. You, young ones, haven't a clue about the history of death, carnage and misery we've suffered under the paws and in the jaws of wolves, Wisdom continued. But their chirps joined together in a deafening chorus that drowned out his dire account of their clan's tragic history. Spot, what has gotten into you? His mother asked, but Spot did not respond. He simply kept chirping. Eventually, Wisdom stopped speaking, unable to be heard above the din. The old rooster was baffled by this strange behavior, so he motioned toward the door, and all the elders left the coop to gather outside. It's as if they're suffering from some sort of group psychosis. What do you make of this? Wisdom asked their parents. We haven't a clue, one of them responded. This must be the work of the wolf, another said. I agree. Perhaps I should meet with him. What if it's a trap intended to take out our leader? Spot's mother cried. I couldn't live with myself if my son led you into the jaws of a wolf. There now. We'll take every precaution. Tell your son that I'll speak with the wolf through the fence if they agree to keep their distance. That will give us a head start to get back to the safety of the coop if they advance upon us. So, a meeting was arranged by Spot, who had suddenly become quite a powerful figure around the henhouse, a newfound status that he rather relished and exploited whenever possible. Even his own mother began treating him differently, walking on eggshells when she interacted with him. He'd become so full of himself that he went out of his way to take the lead in front of Wisdom when they all marched out to the fence line to meet with the alpha wolf and his pack. I'm told they call you Wisdom, the wolf leader said from a safe distance beyond the fence. An apt name, given that you've agreed to come speak with me. Save your false flattery, canine. What do you want? Right to the point, fair enough. I have a simple question for you. Why live in a henhouse that serves humans? Why not a den that serves yourselves and other animals instead? I've prepared such a den, and I'd like to invite you to join us. Through cooperation in a commune, you'll reap the benefits of what you sow, rather than giving it all away. And become a slave to you, or become your next meal, no thank you, Wisdom replied. What motivation would I have to kill chickens producing eggs for all of us to share? I've heard that you have our offspring calling you master. What motivation do I have to switch from one master to the next? Especially when the one making the proposal is a silver-tongued scoundrel who runs with a pack known to be a savage menace. You've heard my proposal. Your brood knows full well it would result in peace and prosperity between us. They are the future. You are the past. Give it some thought, old bird. Perhaps you'll come to your senses. With that, the wily wolf and his pack ran off, leaving Wisdom and his flock surrounded by a perfectly groomed gaggle of wolf followers, all convinced that they knew better than their elders. From that day forth, the chicks, who all soon grew into cockerels and pullets, would not listen to anything their parents had to say, particularly when they were in a group. Instead, they would chirp them down in unison, creating such a noise and disruption that nobody from their prior generation could communicate with them. It was quite disturbing, but not nearly as frightening as the thought of surrendering to the wolves, so their elders stood their ground. Until one evening, Wisdom woke to find the wily wolf staring him directly in his eyes. Their offspring had betrayed them and let the entire pack into the coop. Good evening, Wisdom, the silver-tongued wolf said menacingly. It appears you've been voted down. What's going on? Spot's mother asked drowsily, waking from her slumber. Our brood has forsaken us, Wisdom solemnly replied. Clucks of distress spread through the coop as one by one the others woke to find themselves surrounded. The wolves began to snarl and bark at them until they all got in line, then marched them off to their new quarters, a damp and dark den that would soon be guarded day and night. The next day, when the baffled farmer came out to collect his eggs, he found nothing but an empty coop. The eggs had gone to the wolves, and the pack would never have to hunt again, cementing their loyalty to their alpha. Some couldn't understand why their leader continued to tolerate the little shit they called Spot, but when he gave the order to stop feeding him, it all became clear. The confrontation that followed would live on in wolf lore for generations to come. The pack fed everyone but me. The cocky bird contemptuously crowed at the crafty canine. "Why would they do such a thing?" "Because you've almost served your purpose," his master replied. "What do you mean, almost? I don't understand." "Of course you don't. That's because you, my young friend, are a useful idiot." He then gobbled up Spot so quickly that the only thing left of him was a single feather floating in the air. "There," the wily wolf said with a belch. "Now you've served your purpose.